Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي أفلا يؤمنون. And we made from water every living thing. Will they not believe? Chapter 21, verse 31. So today I'll be talking a little bit about bioreactors in water, and specifically looking at water as a medium for the creation of life. So I'm going to take you back to your chemistry class. You may have remembered this phrase, like dissolves like. Now, water is a polar molecule, and therefore polar compounds, or compounds that contain polar entities, are going to be soluble in water. This amusing comic that is displayed here highlights that chemical property. And so these are some examples of chemical compounds that are shown here. And when they have the different charges on there, that creates that polarity and enables them to be soluble in water. And this is something that's important, and it's going to come to this idea that in order for chemical reactions to take place, different chemical entities need to be close to one another. If I have a friend who's in the next room over, I can't shake his hand because for two reasons. One, he's in a completely different environment than me. He's in a different room. And two, he's too far away from me. So in order for a chemical reaction to take place, different chemical entities need to be close to one another. So when we have these limitations and we try to think about how did life form, we need to take that into account. How are different chemicals coming into contact with one another? And this is actually a really interesting, discipline of organic chemistry, which is called prebiotic chemistry. And it was in 1953 where this gentleman, Stanley Miller, had this idea to try and mimic what the world was like before life, and to see if that could create life. And so in this vessel here, we basically introduced water and ammonia gas, methane gas, and hydrogen gas, heated up the water to boiling, and introduced a spark. And after several days, a reddish precipitate formed. And that precipitate was actually amino acids. Now, these aren't the natural amino acids that you may be familiar with, alanine, valine, etc., but these were unnatural amino acids. But the idea that he was able to create these amino acids from just these simple chemical entities by introducing a lot of energy, really introduced this idea of prebiotic chemistry and looking at when the world had this hot primordial soup, all right, so to speak, of this water with hot boiling water, the sun beating down, a lot of high pressure, different chemical reactions could take place. And so the idea is how are these chemical reactions going to be taking place? Now, we need to think about the interface of bringing molecules closer to one another. So you have water, and the only water that's going to be interacting with the sun is the water that's at the top level, right at the top. Underneath, none of that water is interacting with the sun. So if there's any molecules or chemical entities, they're not going to be able to interact with the sun. But if you have splashes and waves and little small droplets that are entering into the atmosphere, then now you have more surface area and more chances for different chemicals to react with the heat, to react with the air, and form different chemical reactions. And so this is a research paper from 2021 where they looked at research of different types of chemistry. And here there's an example of a polymerization reaction where they have these compounds where you essentially have this hydrophilic chain or hydrophobic chain outside of water. So you have different polar compounds dissolved in the water, non-polar compounds kind of sticking out of the water, and then with the introduction of sun, that heat, it helps to couple these and put these together. Now, if you can imagine different chemical compounds kind of expanding and growing through this process. This is one avenue where chemicals and molecules can grow and develop. And if we look at this further, that this is from water interacting with the air, but what if water was interacting with the surface, with the ground? Because there are very valuable minerals and chemicals on the ground. And so the idea of silica kind of serving as an important process for developing life, this idea kind of developed around 1950s in the scientific community, and it has been developed more and more over time. And the idea is that as water splashes onto a surface, that over time it'll evaporate. And as it evaporates, that gives more surface area, more chances for molecules to come in contact with the silica, with the minerals that are there. And that will facilitate and promote more reactions to take place. And then this actually can crystallize and form sort of like a lattice onto, a layer onto that silica. And that process can be repeated over and over and over again, and you get multiple layers of reactions of crystals forming on the surface of silica. In 2021, there was a paper from Georgia Tech in which scientists looked at a solution of amino acids and introduced this solution of amino acids onto a layer of porous silica. And they heated that up and evaporated that off. And what they found that was remaining on that silica was actually peptides. So the amino acids were combining to form peptides. And so if you can imagine, if this process were repeated over and over and over again, you would end up with proteins, which are essential molecules for the function of life. And it's actually incredible when we reflect on the Holy Quran, where Allah Ta'ala says that He created man from dry, ringing clay, which is like baked pottery. It is on that surface of repeated wringing and drying of that whole process that different biological compounds could be formed. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit to kind of, think about how water plays an important role in our systems, in our biological systems. We know water is an important part of us. We're mostly made up of water. It's important for dissolving different compounds, for transporting different elements in and out of the cell. So we know that water is very important. And from a medical point of view, and thinking about water on different surfaces, there's one area of research and development that has kind of been happening a lot over the past several decades, is on the use of hydrogels. And hydrogels are a polymeric network, and basically it's very flexible and very biocompatible because essentially 10 to 20% of hydrogels is water. And that actually provides a good medium for different biological or medical applications to help patients. And so, for example, contact lenses, you may be very familiar with, these are polymer silicone-based hydrogels. Because they have water, they retain water. Having that moisture in the eye is very beneficial. But there's also usage in using hydrogels to deliver bone cement. You can go to the drugstore and find Band-Aids that have hydrogels on them, and these are good for treating burns or different minor cuts. And there's also a lot of research into tissue regeneration or nerve cell regeneration using hydrogels. And even there's a lot of research as well on implementing hydrogels to deliver drugs because you have a system that is biocompatible and it's going through the medium of water to deliver drugs. And I'll just share one example. This is something that was FDA approved in 2015. It's a Space OAR, and this is actually a hydrogel that's used for patients with prostate cancer. Essentially, the hydrogel is injected in between the prostate and the rectum, and this prevents any sort of, because the patient would be undergoing radiation therapy, this would prevent any radiation from entering into rectum. It provides more comfort and benefit for the patient. So With this, I would like to conclude, as I mentioned, that water really is essential for life, and we can see that through the medium of water, how different chemical reactions could take place that could benefit us, that could benefit the creation of life. I would like to thank the MSLM 24 team. And really, I want to highlight that some of the chapters and work from beloved Hazrat Khalifatul Masih IV, Rahmatullah alayh, in his book, Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge, and Truth. And I would encourage, if anyone is interested, to please read through that subject as well to gain some more interest and knowledge in that. Jazakumullah.